Hi everybody, and welcome to this tech talk that we will cover on building efficient and accurate recommendation engines with Amazon Personalize. My name is Antonio Rodriguez and I work as a solution architect in AWS. I'm based out in Europe, in Madrid, and we have a packed agenda for this tech talk, and we want to start basically by covering what are the most common use cases that we have in recommendation engines in general. We have had other tech talks before during this year covering the launch of Amazon Personalize and how the product works. But we want to focus now on what are the use cases that we can leverage on when we talk about recommendation engines and what are the typical challenges that we have. So the first thing that we can think of is obviously when we want to deliver target marketing campaigns. So we want to probably have personalized notifications to our users or our customers where we want to only target a subset of all our customer base, and we want to contact them in different ways and obviously offer a specific product that we know that are most likely for them to purchase or subscribe. Another use case that is very common is when we want to make upselling. So when we want to make product recommendation and we want to discover the relationships that might exist between customers and potential products that they might buy. So that's a typical use case that we see in example in Amazon.com, where we see products you might like or others have seen these products and things like that. And then you have the other use case, which is search and browsing experience personalization. So we have many customers that are asking us nowadays that whenever their customers and their users go to the website, uh, no matter what's my business, if I'm in retail, I'm a e-learning catalog, or whatever is my business, I want my homepage to offer that personalized experience for each one of the users. And this can be based on different things like a profile of the users, clickstream, etc. So we want to classify those users in different sets so that we can offer personalized items for them or products or services. And then obviously we want to re-rank our items or products so that we only show the ones that are most likely for them to purchase or subscribe. There are other use cases that we can cover around recommendation engines. It's not really the recommendation engine as we understand it in artificial intelligence or machine learning. But there are things like identifying trends in users and customer purchase experiences and things like that. For all of that, we can also use Amazon SageMaker, but that's not, let's say, the topic on this Tech Talk today. So personalization definitely offers material business results. So we have proven based on our experience that we, not only in Amazon.com, but in general with our experience with our products, we know that in terms of engagement, we can get up to a 15% increase on engagement when we apply personalization on our products. The second thing is product discovery. So we know that up to 80% clicks on the tail items are increased when we have personalization involved in the process using artificial intelligence. Also conversion. So when we want customers to actually uh, transform the way that they are using our products, this has increased up to 30% as well based on our data. And obviously revenue. That's the end goal of the business at the end. And we can get up to 5% increase based on our data when we use personalization. So this is really something very powerful and something that many enterprises are using more and more, especially in the last or the recent years. So what are the challenges of having effective recommendation engines normally? The first one is having custom models. So personalization models must definitely reflect the user's behavior, and the user behavior is always changing. It's always dynamic. It depends on many things. It depends on the context. It depends on what's happening around, what's happening in the families and the friends of that user, what's happening in the consumption, in the life of the person. Maybe I have a baby, now I need a different set of products now, and things like that. So we need models that are capable of adapting and being able to be customized. So that's very challenging when we are building recommendation engines because we cannot understand the users in the same way all the time. Second thing is real time. Personalization must be fast, must be responsive, must be changing dynamically on the user intent. We cannot wait for models to train whenever the user is clicking, because that takes a lot of time. So we need models to adapt to the user intent, and that's something that is very challenging normally with classic machine learning. The other thing are the cold starts. So users should get relevant recommendations, and if we have new items in our inventory, they should be also considered now, and it should be considered in a different way, because maybe the new items are more popular, and also we should consider what's the history of that user, so that we know that maybe now he has an interest that he didn't have before. So we have to make sure that we always have relevant recommendations in our data for that user, and we are not considering the last X years all the time, or all of our inventory all the time. The other thing is the popularity trap. So the naive and the classic machine learning models always give recommendations based on, similar items, and that's it. But that is proven that doesn't work efficiently. So we don't have high accuracy in our personalization when we only rely on the popularity of the item. So we need something else. We need context, we need history, and we need things like that. And obviously, the last thing is scale. So recommendation engines should scale across millions of users and items, as we say, and that's very important in some specific business, like in example in retail, obviously, but also in other cases. I was talking before about e-learning example. So I have a huge catalog of courses, let's say, and I need to interact with millions of users, because I want my business to scale. And in the world that we are now, that is global, that's very important. So how do we tackle that? So Amazon Personalize was built basically because in Amazon in general, in Amazon.com, and that's we just hear a saying from Jeff Bezos, that where he said that basically the success that we have had for more than 20 years now is basically based on the fact that we put the customer first, we invent, and then we are patient. And having the customer first is the reason why we have exposed all the know-how that we have in Amazon.com on how to do personalization and how to do recommendation to our users. So that thing that I was saying before about the product reel that we have recommending products that are similar or most likely to be purchased by our customers, is actually the base of the research and all the work that we have done on artificial intelligence and machine learning during those years that we were referring to. And that's how we build Personalize to expose that knowledge to our users in AWS. So basically, all of our customers now have the ability to rely on the same technology that we have at Amazon.com and use that for your business. And it doesn't matter if you are a very small startup or if you are a huge enterprise corporation, you will have the same technology available for you. And that's the purpose, and that's our customer obsession for giving you that technology. So how does it work? So in reality, what we have is that we combine different sources of information. So as we saw in the last tech talk when we were talking and introducing Amazon Personalize, we basically have all the information about the user. So we have demographics about the user, so we can have things like age, location, etc. So all the information we can have on the user will make our recommendation engine better. And obviously, we have items in our inventory. So we have the articles, we have the products, we have the videos, etc. With all the categories, information, everything we can have around our products. And finally, and most importantly, we have the interactions. So we have the views, the signups, the conversion, etc. So this user X have purchased this item Y, or this user X have viewed this article but has not purchased, and things like that. So these kind of interactions is what make the personalization richer in some use cases. And basically, we feed that into Personalize, and it exposes an API with the trained models, and basically we can exploit doing inference on those and saying, all right, I now have a user that has this characteristics, or is this user X, and what products should I recommend for him, and the other way around. I have this product, what set of users should I trigger a notification campaign or upselling campaign, etc. And that's in terms of infrastructure in AWS. In reality, all this information that we are showing here is going into an S3 bucket, and we have an S3 bucket in the account of the user that is let's say working with the Amazon Personalize, and then this data is basically copied to another bucket in our personalized, let's say, VPC or service area, and basically that data is fully encrypted. So even when we make a copy, as I said, it's just for the purposes of the performance and how the product works, but we never actually get to see that data or work with that data. And the data, all the privacy of the data always belongs to the user. So what we only do is that we enrich that with the know-how that we know from Amazon.com that I said before. So that's basically the algorithms that we let available for the user to choose, and the hyperparameters. So basically what set of settings we recommend that you use and you can play with so that you can adapt your personalizations to your needs, and then you have the most efficient and the most accurate recommendation get going. What are the file formats that we have in our data? So as I said before, we have users, we have items, and we have interactions. So normally in the data sets, that's how we call this set of data. We basically have some required fields and we have some reserved fields, let's say. For the users, we at least need the user ID. So that's basically a number that we assign to each one of our users or our customers, and then that's a unique ID in which we identify all of them. The same for the items, so we need an ID for each one of the products or the services or whatever we have in our catalog for doing the recommendation. And then the interactions. For the interactions, we need both the user ID and the item ID, so we know which customer is interacting with which item in our inventory, and a timestamp so that we can keep track on when was that happening, etc. So those are the required fields, and then we can enrich that information with anything else. So in example, if I show here a JSON on the metadata schema that we have for the users example, you will see that we have the user ID field that is required, and then we enrich the data with other things, like in example, the age, the gender, etc. So we can have as much information as we want, and we can play with those fields so that we can have inference based on those, etc. So that's how it works. Now, obviously, when we have all this information fit into Personalize, we go through different steps. So obviously, we inspect the data, and that was explained in the last tech talk again, but we basically identify the main features, and we get to be able to select the algorithms that we can use for the personalization. And we do that through something that we call the recipe. So basically, we say, okay, what is the machine learning algorithm that I want to rely on for making the personalization, and if I want to use more than one, because I might want to check on different versions, different types of algorithms, different kind of deep learning technologies that are used here, and then see what's the result that I had, was the error, what's the accuracy, etc. And based on that, we can decide what's our best model for going to production and doing the inferences. So obviously we can play with hyperparameters, and we will see that in a demo in a minute. We train the models, we optimize those models, we iterate if it's needed, and then we host it. So we can basically make inferences to those, and we have models that are fully ready to be exploited using just an API. In general, what are the key features and the advantages of Amazon Personalize? So the first thing is that we have high quality recommendations, and obviously this works very well, especially when we have hundreds or even thousands or items or on users and on our problems, because probably if you have just a couple of items in your catalog, you don't even need deep learning for that, right? So maybe you just need classical machine learning, you need a regression, you can even rely on SageMaker for doing that. But this product is really powerful when we have complex problems, when we have hundreds of items, you have millions of items and millions of users. That's where you can rely on this kind of algorithms that we will show in a minute, and you will get an impressive accuracy with those. So that's the power. The other thing is the real time. It's very fast. It's the hardware that we have underneath in the infrastructure in our cloud is optimized so that we can get to the lowest levels of latency, and we can really get you a fast training and fast inferences at the end, so that you can in real time get an API inference and get your recommendation IDs, so that you can populate your web page and things like that, so you can make interactions in real time with your users and so on. It's easy to use. You will see it in a minute. It's all through the console. You can use the SDK. You can use APIs directly. And it was almost with any product or content. So when we say users, items, interactions, that's applicable for almost anything on the field, no matter what is your business, no matter what is the thing that you want to personalize on. So I will move quickly because I want to show you the demo, but I wanted to speak a little bit about the deep learning and a feature that we have that is called AutoML. So the evolution of how a user is interested in a product and then lose the interest and so on is important to consider when we do a recommendation engine, and basically because the order and the timing and the specific patterns that each one of the users is having when purchasing items and so on will define what's the next action that this user is going to do, or what's the interest of this user at this point in his life. So if I have a user that, in example, is buying a watch and then checks another watch and then suddenly starts to see a shoe, it's very likely that this user is the next item he's going to purchase, or the next item he's going to view, is another shoe. So he's probably losing the interest, and this obviously is extremely simplified. But if you think on the long term and you see on many interactions and items, it's obvious that this customer at some point has lost the interest on the watches. Maybe he already bought the watch, or is no longer interested in that, and change the focus. Now he's thinking on a different product, right? So we can see these kind of trends, obviously not with a single item, but with many items, and that's important to consider. The other scenario is the other way around. So if I start with a shoe and then I start looking at watches, the most likely scenario that is the next item that I'm going to purchase is a watch. So that's what we call about the order and the timing and the historical interest and disinterest. So for that, we basically rely on deep learning, and there is something that is called in the deep learning in general is called the recurrent neural networks. And basically the recurrent neural networks is a way to consider what is the history that we are having in our data, and let's say get that feed into our networks for making inferences and deciding what's the next action that this user is going to do. And we are adding that to other information that we have around items, around the user in general, and we even can add a learned user representation on how is the trend that is typical for this user and so on. And that's what led us to what we call the recurrent recommender. So it's basically based on sequential modeling, as we were saying before. And you will find that in Amazon Personalize as hierarchical recurrent neural network. So that's what we call the HRNN. And that's one of the algorithms that you will have available when we go to the console now. And that's one of the, let's say, secret sauces. It's not secret in reality, but it's one of the powers that we have with this product for making recommendation engines that are efficient, that are accurate, and are very powerful in general for these kind of things. So we have a set of predefined recipes. As I said before, a recipe is how I decide that I want to run through different algorithms and see what is the accuracy that I get with my data for deciding what is the best model that I want to have servicing through the API when I do inferences. And one that we have is what we call the personalized ranking. So personalized ranking is basically we have a list of users, and we have search results that are specific for those users, and we basically rank the results that we have based on the highest percentage that we have through the lowest percentage. The other thing that we have is when we want to see related items. So in example, we have similar items, and based on one item, we can see what is the probability that the user is going to interact with another item that is probably related. So detecting these kind of patterns is obviously important. We want to make recommendations for upselling products and so on. And we do that with a really high performance, and basically for improving item discoverability. So we want items that are maybe in our stock that we really want to push for the users, and we discovered that this item might be very important for them based on similar characteristics between that one product and the other, categories and so on. And the last one is what I was talking before, which is basically the user personalization. So basically relies on the HRNN that I was referring to, and consider what is the temporal orders of the interactions that we have seen on the users and the items. And that's very powerful when the users are likely to change their minds and the behavior is changing. We suddenly see that during the summer something is changing on the behaviors of specific users, or during a given day, New Year, things like that. So that's important to detect these kind of patterns, right? We have also flavors in that. We have what we call metadata, is when we consider things about the users that are additional to the basic data. So in example, demographics on the users, we have more information on the items and so on. And what we call the cold start, which is the ability to recommend the items as soon as they are added to the model. And that's very important because you don't need to, let's say, retrain with all of your data again for updating, let's say, your recommendation engine. So that's, again, a very powerful feature and a very powerful algorithm, let's say, in our recipe. So how's the performance of Amazon Personalize? I will just show one of the KPIs. I recommend you to go to the documentation I will show at the end of the webinar for checking more data. But generally, if we see the root mean square error based on ratings on Netflix, in example, and ratings on Movie Lens, we can see based on this data that the HRNN is really showing a lower root mean square error compared to other methods that are used for recommendation engines nowadays. So we can see also the year on which each one of those methods was released. And at the end, what we are showing here is really the machine learning performance that is outstanding for this specific algorithm. So that's one of the reasons why we included it in the product that we're exposing now to our customers. So I wanted to highlight for finishing this part just two things. The first thing is, again, hierarchical sequential models are important. It works for your personalization tasks very well. It shows you, it gives you stable solutions directly. You don't have to make complex customizations. You just go through the console, you just go through the SDK, the API, and you already have a solution that is going to stay in time for you and your business for having those recommendations in an accurate way. It includes many tricks from deep learning practitioners. So we have considered a lot of the know-how that we have in-house in AWS and in Amazon in general regarding these techniques in deep learning for doing the personalization. And the AutoML is the ability that the Amazon Personalize choose the best algorithm, the best possible result that we have for us. So it will basically iterate on the different options that it has on algorithms, and it will find what is the best option for you, and it will propose you to use that one and run in production with that one, and you can compare one with the other and so on. So you have to, if you don't want to get into the complexity of what each one of those algorithms and recipes that I was showing before is doing, you can simply select AutoML, and the Amazon Personalize will do automatically an evaluation, let's say, of the different algorithms, and will choose the best one for you. It requires minimal intervention. And the other thing is, obviously, you have the options to do hyperparameters optimization on that. So it will allow you to automatically choose the best set of hyperparameters, which is one of the most complex tasks that we have in machine learning and artificial intelligence in general. It will do it for you, so you have the ability of having recommendation engines with minimal intervention from the users in general. So I want to talk about a specific use case now. Let's imagine that I have an e-commerce website and I have a corporate website, whatever. So normally we have dynamic content shown in the websites today based on users' profile and things like that. So in example, if I have a family, I might show a picture of the family on the homepage of my website, and I can show if I know the range of age that I have in that user, based on the profile that I have stored, based on the clickstream activity and so on, I might show specific things, like an example, apply for a credit now, things like that. Maybe if the user is not my customer yet, I can also show some buttons like learn more and so on. But what happens is that if the user is already my customer, I can show a manage my account button, and I know that he's in the young age. I can show a picture that is different, that is more inspiring for them, and I can give resources that are relevant for them. In example, pay my providers, use my car, and so on. So all of this information is happening on the websites today in the internet, and you can use that information to feed your recommendation engine and do something more. So in example, you might want to have a dynamic selection of the articles for doing recommendations and promotions, and that can be basically based on the history of the user, the behavior that he when he's browsing your website, the product stock status that you might have, and obviously the profile of that user. So if I know I have an e-learning website, let's say, and I know this user is checking for entrepreneur content, I can obviously recommend this user to try our entrepreneur learning track and learn and subscribe here. I can show some recommended content for him. If I know he has interest for cloud computing and he wants to know how taxes work for a small and medium business, I can recommend some specific catalog of courses. I can recommend workshop and discussion groups that are relevant for them, etc. So that's how you interact with the users for relying on the information that Amazon Personalize will give you. So without further ado, I will jump to a demo so that you see how that works. So if we go now, let's say to a website like this, let's say that I have a website where I have the movie lens data set. As you know, the movie lens is a data set full of ratings of pictures, of movies. And then based on those reviews, I have the ability, let's say, to make inference on those and give personalized recommendations to my users. So let's say that I want to do my personalization based on just my personal recommendations. Let's say that I don't want to do nothing more complex than that. Just consider who's the user, and then based on that, recommend some movies. So in example here, I have Apollo 13, Indiana Jones, Terminator, and so on. If I choose something different, let's say I want to include multiple genders. In example, I want to consider whether I have in my recommendation here a comedy, a thriller, an action movie, I have a crime movie, or whatever. So if I do that now, you will see that my recommendation setting is different. So now I have here Indiana Jones, I have Alien, and so on. So what I'm having here is actually the front end, and in the back end, what I'm doing is an API call. And that's all that is happening behind the scenes. And by the way, this demo is really nice. It's from one of our solution architects, Andrew, who has a lot of documentation here that we can share later, basically on considering different types of items and different types of modeling that you can do for your personalization. What is happening behind the scenes, as I said before? So what is happening behind the scenes is very simple. It's in reality, I'm opening here a Postman, and if you see, I'm just launching an API to my endpoint, in this case, a recommendation endpoint that I have on my personalized model here. And basically, I'm just feeding what is my user ID. Let's say my user ID is 10, and I want the top top 10 results. So I want to give recommendations to this user based on movie lens. And I just send this API. And what I'm going to get as a return are the item IDs. So those are basically the IDs of the movies that I have to show on that reel that you saw before. So maybe the item 272 corresponds to Indiana Jones, the 268 corresponds to Alien, 269 to Blade Runner, and so on. So that's what is happening, and you can see that it's very fast. And based on that, you can build all of your application and the activities that you have in your websites and so on. We can also do things in real time, as I said before. So let's say that I have another demo here, and I'm logged here. Let's log off, and I have here a user. Let's say I want to log in as user number 2. In this case, I have here options to the different recipes. Let's say I want to have HRNN cold start, as I said before, so I can consider real-time actions that I do in my data set. So here you can see that I have some recommendations already for this user number 2. So I have here Double Life of Veronique, Hate, Big Body, whatever. And maybe I start seeing a trend in my users. So let's say I open a comedy movie now, and I purchase this item, and I go back to my cold start recommendation, and you see that suddenly I have more comedy now in my recommendations. So this is happening in real time, as you can see. So I don't need to go and retrain my model for having a new recommendation. In reality, I am already updating this. So that's the power of what we have here in this recommendation engine. So it's in real time learning from the information and the interactions that I'm doing with the data set. Let's say that I have another case here. I'm an e-learning university, and I'm showing some recommendations, some online courses that I want my users to take. Let's say now that I have one user, let's say username 1, I say send my user ID 1, I get 3 results, and then it says I have item ID that, and that. And then I can suddenly give a recommendation specific for my user that is based on an API that I'm throwing to Amazon Personalize. So that's how we can see it in the console in the web browser. And obviously the user experience is going to be, let's say, transparent and smooth from everything that is happening behind the scenes. And another thing that we can do is obviously learn how to train our models and learn how to build everything that we have on that data set on MovieLens. So I will give you some information at the end on how on a full GitHub repository where you can learn the whole process. We did some of it in the last Tech Talk, but basically, if you remember, we went through defining the data sets, and some data sets that were the users, the items, and the event interactions. And we can have trackers, in example, for doing this real-time thing that I did before on purchase, update immediately my models and so on. And finally, I will have a solution, and those solutions are going to be deployed in campaigns that I can rely on basically for having inferences to those campaigns. So I have an endpoint here that I'm going to use for making my recommendations. I can then say I'm user 2 and I want to get recommendations, and I immediately get my item IDs and so on. And another nice thing that you can do, as I said before, is doing notification campaigns for your users. So if you use a service that is called Pinpoint, and you can go to Pinpoint, and basically if you create a project, I have a demo project here, you can define a segment. In example, a segment is as simple of defining who are the users, and on a CSV file, it's very simple to say who are the users that I want to target in my campaigns in marketing, let's say. So maybe you can feed that information just by writing on a CSV file based on different things, based on recommendations from Personalize, based on interactions with your users, based on your business needs or strategy and so on. And if I have each one of the lines in my CSV file would say basically what's the ID of the user and what's the method that I want to trigger the notifications to them. In Pinpointing example, we can do emails, SMS, we can do push notifications to the mobile devices and so on. And then I have the ID, so the email address, I have the phone number of this user and so on. if I create a campaign for that user, my campaign can be as simple as this one in my example, and I can have different types of interactions models with them. So in example, I have some examples here. This one is for the e-learning that I said before. So I want to send an email. The channel is an email to my email address, and I want this to be the subject. So learn some learning Python courses, and then the message body that I want this user to receive. And here I define basically my marketing campaign, right? So I have my endpoints, who is the target of this campaign, and I basically launch it. And it's as simple as that. So I can duplicate my campaign. I can make changes on my campaign. I can do some tests on the messaging to make sure that it's working fine and so on. And the best part is that I can do some analytics based on that. So if I show you so one of the emails that I have for this test campaign that I just launched a few seconds ago, so it will be something like this, where I get an email that says subscribe to the Acme Learning Python courses, and I get all the content I was showing before. And when I open this email, I immediately get a pointer here that it says that I had a user that received an email from me, and it can have information on what was let's say the rate of emails that were actually open, how many users may click on the URL that I was giving, so you can have more information on what was the stickiness of your messages, what was the retention rate of those emails, and so on. So you can have tracking, you can have statistics, analytics on what was the success of your marketing campaign, trying to market, trying to target some users and so on. So you can even combine that with revenue information if you insert some information on your revenue attributes, and you can check events on the endpoints, demographics, etc. So Pinpoint is a very powerful service that you can combine with Amazon Personalize for doing this kind of campaigns and so on. So I'm going to go back to my presentation, and I just want to end by giving you some resources to learn more. So the first thing is obviously the documentation of the product. So I recommend you to go to the website of the Amazon Personalize, and the resources webpage where you have all the documentation, webinars, and so on. There is a sample notebook that I recommend you that is based on is stored in GitHub in the samples of AWS. And there is also a demo from Chris King, a solution architect in AWS, where you can see a full GitHub repository workshop driving you through the whole thing of setting up a movie lens data set in a solution. Fully usable as I show in some of the demos today. And obviously the learning resources in our training and certification portal. So if you go to this link, you will basically see all the track for machine learning, but there is some specific courses that are only for personalization, recommendation engines, and so on. So I really recommend you. It's free of charge watching and following those training and certification courses. So that's highly recommended for our users. So if you have further questions, don't hesitate to contact me. This is my email address, and also follow me on the social networks. I'm always posting some content about the news on AWS machine learning and artificial intelligence services, and all the events that we are organizing around the world. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next Tech Talk.